Mr. J.R. Rivas.
Are we starting?
Dude, we are rolling. You are the first episode in the new studio. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the presence of greatness. The man who single-handedly brought back a championship to Denver for the NBA, eradicated racism, and made Josh Forti feel so important when he showed up to his wedding. Mr. J.R. Rivas, how are you?
That was actually a good time, the wedding. And the championship, too, actually.
Yeah.
I'm good. Just living life. And this is probably like my third or fourth time doing a podcast with you. But I think I was on season 1 of Think Different Theory. Are we even allowed to say that without?
We're allowed to say it. We're just not allowed to brand it. We're not allowed to produce content under that name because Apple. It's a fun story though. Dan Henry was like, dude, you should milk it for all it's worth. Be like, I was so successful that Apple sued me. And I was like, all right, Dan, let's not be dramatic. But yeah. So let's see. You've been up to a lot of stuff. Some of the stuff you can talk about, some stuff you can't.
That sounds bad.
Also, well, I mean, it's all good things, right? It's all good things. But we got lots to cover here today. So we built a new studio. You have one objective. You have to make this studio sound so cool so that everybody wants to come out and do a podcast.
I was thinking about that on the way here because it was a 30-minute drive for me.
In the Lambo.
And I was like, who the fuck's going to come to Broomfield to sit in Josh Forti's basement to be on a podcast?
You.
But if they fly private, there's an airport right here.
Well, we're 20 minutes from the airport, though, dude. It's a straight shot.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. The last time you came over here, you saw Willow, my daughter, and you asked a bunch of questions about what it's like to be a father. And
yeah, actually, I wanted to ask about that because half the people I talk to about having kids are like, don't do it. And then the other half
they're dumb.
are like, it's the best thing ever, blah, blah, blah. So I know where you stand on that, but I'm still like, I'm leaning towards having kids because like, what else is there to do? But also the people scared.
That's a terrible reason to have kids.
The people who have told me not to, they're like, there are no refunds. So think through this carefully. And it scares the shit out of you when somebody's like, yeah, I wouldn't do it if I were you.
Yeah, but what's the reasoning behind it? Like, why do they think it's a bad thing?
No one's really giving me a great reason. It's just like your life changes when you have kids. And one person in particular, like, he kind of like can't do stuff that much. And they both these people,
what do you mean? Because
both
of
the
kids?
people that have told me not to have kids have nannies too.
Weird.
Yeah,
what the heck? Sounds like they're way too privileged. Dude, no, kids are the best. I mean, I come from 8 kids, remember, right? There's 8 kids in my family. I'm the second oldest. Homeschooled, grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Like, so, I mean, I've seen the big family side of things. And I always swore, I was like, there's 0% chance I'm gonna have a big family, right? And I still don't think I'm gonna have a huge family, right? I don't plan on having 8 kids or anything. But there is nothing that you could have told me that would have prepped me or like prepared me for what having a kid did, right? It entered in this whole new perspective on life, right? So like for me, it's the best. Like, I mean, I thought business was like, there was business and there was Leah, and like Leah, I felt like was like, she was almost this thing that like came in and allowed me to be a better person and all that. And it was still like me and her and the business. And it was like kind of this, like she was contributing to me grow, right? Babies just take, right? Like there is no output of baby except for happiness, right? And so for me, like if you would have been like, explain having a kid, like how is it so great? I don't know. I couldn't tell you what I would have told myself. I couldn't tell you this, but the perspective that it gave and the shift in like focus and perspective and purpose and what life was all about, like suddenly really made sense. And while I'm still very much driven in the business and I'm down here all the time and like to build stuff, dude, there's nothing like going upstairs and like you're just hanging out with her. So I would love to know what those people are talking about.
I guess added responsibility. Like one in particular will be like going to play basketball and then he's like, oh, I can't because I just got a call that I gotta go be there for the kid. And then his girl's having like a midlife crisis about like not having her whole identity wrapped up in motherhood and like very first world shit, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualizations at the top. When my mom had me, there was no fucking like, oh, I don't want to lose my identity because I have a kid. Like it was literally just like survival. So I think definitely like, when you're very privileged, you have more time and energy to dedicate to like, how has this child affected my life and how do I feel about it and stuff like that. Whereas, my parents and probably your parents, it was just like, okay, we have a kid. Like, there's no how do I feel about this
Yeah.
thing. It's just like, this is what has to be done.
Well, it's interesting too. I talked to my mom about this, well, and my dad too. And so they had 4 boys, boy, and then they were gonna be done. Like that was it. And then like for them, and I'm not at this point, like I don't know if I agree with this, but like they believe that the primary purpose of marriage is to have kids.
I kind of agree.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, what did I have in that? Let me finish the thought, then I'll question as to why. But so they were gonna be done, and then they studied the Bible, and they were like, nope, we're gonna have more kids. And so then they decided to have more kids, and they had girl, 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 girl. So they had 4 boys, and then they had 4 girls.
Nice.
So for them, it was just like, this is what marriage was designed to do. Like we're gonna try for kids, and whatever we get, like this is what God wanted for us. So they had 8, and I mean, they did not have financial resources by any means, right? But like they wouldn't have traded it for the world. Like you could offer them $1 billion and take away the 4, and they wouldn't obviously say yes. So I think that depending upon the worldview that you have will determine whether or not having a kid it makes sense or not, or is worth it, right? So why do you think that the primary reason for marriage is kids?
I mean, because one, I'm not super religious, so I don't know if I believe no sex before marriage and stuff like that. So then I've seen a lot of Christians, the purpose of getting married is to have sex. so
they can't have sex. Yeah.
Rule that one out. And then
speaking of, side note on that, there was a couple I knew that one time, they both worked at Chick-fil-A. And the reason that they got married when they did, rather than waiting till they were in a better financial situation, is because they didn't think that they could wait to have sex before marriage. So they ended up getting married and lived in her parents' house together after marriage for like the first year and a half while working at Chick-fil-A just so they could have sex. I'm like, all right, that is a crazy way to view the world.
But when I think about getting married and like why I would get married, the first reason is like, well, I want to have kids. So I feel like, if you're not having kids, then I don't see a big reason to get married. Especially because like one of my business partner just got engaged. I'm helping him plan his wedding.
Shout out Bill, let's go.
I'm helping him plan his wedding. And I'm like, there's no way you get out of this under 50 grand. Like, no, like I've tried spinning it every which way and like, oh, maybe do this, maybe nope. So that's one reason. The second reason, I think the whole wedding thing. Your wedding looked pretty expensive too.
Yeah. we did the ceremony in Mexico with like 10 people, right? And then we did the reception.
Yeah.
And the reception actually wasn't that bad.
So so when I think about like getting married and all the reasons to get married, I'm like, there's really not a lot of upside from a logical standpoint of like, now I'm, dividing half my shit. Now there's risk. Granted, like my girl would sign a prenup, and
would you do if you get married, you're gonna do a prenup?
Probably. I mean, I feel like it makes sense. Although I will say I have almost zero reason to believe that I would even need a prenup.
Yeah.
And she like doesn't care about money. And I know, women say that all the time when they actually do care about money.
No, I feel like,
but I've seen it in her actions of like, we could go to a Motel 6 or we can go to the Hyatt. Yeah. And she just does not care, and like has never once pushed me to like spend more money on something that was frivolous or whatever. So I don't think I would need one, but I think it just, it makes sense. I've seen people smarter than me and richer than me fall victim to divorce court and lose half their shit. Yeah. So when you think about it that way, it's like, okay, for outside of religious beliefs, what is the real upside of marriage if you're already living together, you're already kind of sharing your life?
Why would you need to get married in order to have kids?
It just feels like the right thing to do, like to have your parents be married, and it shows their commitment to each other.
But bro, you are not a feelings person.
Yeah,
you're a pretty logical person though, right?
Yeah, but I mean, if your parents aren't married, it shows their lack of commitment to each, or not necessarily. Like I've had friends growing up that their parents weren't married and nobody ever really knew. Like they wore rings and all that stuff. They just weren't married. But I think it just shows commitment to your kids to be married.
So if you get married, then is the purpose of marriage, like, do you think you should have as many kids as possible?
I would love to have as many kids as possible. And I think that, after one is probably the hardest. And after that, it's like, you have 7 brothers and sisters. It's probably pretty cool. Your family reunions are probably super fun. You probably have a lot of nieces and nephews, or will have a lot of nieces and nephews. So the tribe and community aspect, like I grew up with my sister who's 9 years older. If I need, like, I remember being in 6th grade, and I had to get to school, but I didn't have a way to get to school. And my mom literally had to knock on our neighbor's door because she just kind of like scoped them out and saw them taking their kids to school, and then basically asked them if they can take me to school and bring me back.
Mm.
And these were just complete strangers, but that was really like the only option. And for a while she would like come on her lunch break, literally be eating in the car and pick me up from school and then drive me home and try to fit this into 30 minutes and usually be late back to work. I think it's definitely good to have as many kids as possible because having a tribe is beneficial to everybody. Like, for example, my business partner, big ass Asian family. I went to his birthday in California. First of all, they have 2 houses on the same lot. Half the family lives here, other half the family lives here.
It's so crazy.
And it's like,
so crazy.
And this is like, they bought it a long time ago, but now at this point, I would guess these 2 houses combined are a couple $1 million because it's California.
Yeah.
You walk in, there's like babies, grandparents, great uncles, great aunts, cousins, uncles, parents. And it was just really, it was like something I hadn't been exposed to really growing up because I had one sister, and then my mom's sister lived in the same town as us, and they only had 2 kids. So all our family functions was like 6 people.
That's crazy.
So,
do you know your dad?
Do I know him?
Yeah.
I met my dad when I was 8 years old.
That's it.
And interesting story. If you want to, have I told you this?
No, actually, that's why I'm super curious. I'm just realizing that I don't know that story. But let's come back to that, because I feel like you're looking at the whole concept of kids and family and all that from a tribal perspective of like, this is what's best for everyone and support and community. Yes. Okay. So then if you're not very religious, like, what is your lens of the world in the sense of like, when I view the world, right? I mean, I grew up in a Christian home that was pretty freaking conservative. Like, like by any definition, most people would say it was a cult. It wasn't actually a cult, but like, many people would have thought it was. But like, when we would go to church, we had 8 kids. We were the small to average person. There's people 11, 12, kids there, right? And so I grew up in that setting. And then after I graduated high school, pretty much walked away from the church, never abandoned God, if you will. But like, for all intents and purposes, I wasn't very religious for a while. And then I came back and like, I found a relationship with Jesus and Christ. And so when I view the world, the lens that I view the world through is through the lens of Jesus and Christianity. And so because of that, all the filters of like what good is, what bad is, how things were designed and optimized and created and how things fit together and all that is through that lens, right? If you don't have that lens, how do you view the world?
I think that's still a vague question, but I will say this.
Like, okay, so like how do you define like good and bad and morality or purpose or meaning? Like how do you figure out what any of this is? Like, what's the lens?
Bro, if you've never found God, you slap the shit out of an old lady, you're still going to feel bad. I think morality is like a compass inside of us. So I will say I'm not religious, and I would say even more lately, I've been learning more about like Islam, the Bible. My girlfriend even tells me, she's like, some of the Bible stuff better than a lot of Christians.
Yeah.
And I'll literally watch like on TikTok, I get a lot of like Christian people breaking down Bible verses and talking about like a 10-minute segment about the end times and Revelation, and I sit there and I listen to it because it's very interesting to me. Yeah. And also, like, I love Christian music too.
No, I know. No, but like, I'm genuinely curious from like, you're very smart, right? Like you think through things the way that you.
I wouldn't say I'm very smart. I'd say I'm slightly above average.
Okay. You can think whatever you want. The reality is that you are like, you think through things. You're a deep thinker, right? You figured some things out. And like, I feel like the more success somebody has, the more, it might not be the correct view, but they have a broader view of the world, right? Because they have to understand people and they have to understand, different things and structural things. So like, you have a very unique perspective on things, right? And I love talking to you and asking questions because you provide a unique context. What I'm trying to understand is like, when you're looking at it from the like having a big family, it's like, oh, that's good for the kids to see that you guys are committed, or it's good to have a big family because of the support or whatever. But like, why is that the goal? Like, why have kids at all? Or why should there be a big family? Or like, what is your lens to determine right and wrong? Or how do you make decisions on how to move your life forward and what to optimize for? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of teeter back and forth between like, I think of all perspectives. So one perspective, I'm like, maybe we are just here.
Yeah.
And I look at every other species, and every other species' internal compass is reproduction. And that's pretty much it. So that's the purpose of every other species on Earth.
Mm.
Like as soon as they get old enough, like my dog was humping at like 10 weeks old. So, and that's an internal deep, deep driver. So I sometimes look at it, I'm like, that could be all that there is. It's just reproduce, keep the species going. But then I look at it from a different lens sometimes, and I'm like, well, humans have evolved differently than every other species, significantly. So maybe we are special, maybe we are unique. And then all the way down to like flat earth theory, where they think that the earth is flat, it's the center of the universe, and everyone's hiding it to hide the existence of God and the government and all that kind of stuff. I think it's crazy, but I consider that perspective as well. And it's kind of like the paradox of choice. Like when most people that are Christian or Islamic, it's because that was the first and only perspective that they were ever fed.
Yeah.
So
sure.
they had one choice and they took it.
Yep.
I think the more you start to look at, like, I've stayed at Buddhism retreats.
Yep.
I've looked at, I've had 4-hour conversations with Dan about Islam.
Oh, so
and the more you kind of take in all these different perspectives, then the harder it really is to say like, this is indefinitely, without a shadow of a doubt, what I believe. Because I've sat with Dan and his Islamic friends, and they are extremely convicted, just like you are.
Yeah.
And I've sat with, Buddhists, and I met a kid one time at a Buddhist monastery. He was 19, Caucasian. That's relevant because it was a Vietnamese Buddhism camp, and had completely like renounced his life. And he was going to be a software engineer before this. And I was asking him, like, I just find it crazy. Like at 19, like you're never having sex again. And it's not like, I mean,
it's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah.
And it's not like, there's no like scandals in this organization where people like actually do have sex or whatever.
Yeah.
So like actually like renouncing sex and alcohol and, just video games, anything, at 19. So that says to me that this person is extremely convicted that this is the way for him to live his life. So when you spend enough time with so many people that are so convicted, it makes you kind of, you're like, okay, all these people have extreme conviction.
Mm-hmm.
So how could I really just pick one of these and follow that path?
Yeah.
So
couldn't that just be, because like, I'm reading a book right now that Dan's wife actually gave me, The Islamic Jesus, right? So like reading about Jesus from the Islamic perspective, right? And I mean, definitely studying other religions. Couldn't that concept of the fact that all these people, whatever walk of life that they're in, being completely convicted on something, rather than it being like, oh, there's not one true thing, instead be like, does not show the need for, or the desire to be committed to something greater, like just as a whole?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean there's not one true way, right? Or do you think that does?
It's really, really hard for me to say indefinitely. And that's why I always come back to like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because when, like, I think I messaged you, I think it was you, where I was like, did you know that Cain and Abel in the Bible, basically they split off into two religions, Islam and Christianity. And
not Cain and Abel, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
This
Isaac and
Isaac,
Ishmael,
Ishmael and Isaac.
Yep.
Sorry, I was actually reading another thing the other day about how Cain's father was the devil, because it says,
interesting.
Jesus says, "You are born of your father, the devil," literally verbatim in the Bible. Cain's the evil one, right?
Yeah, Cain.
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure I don't mess that up. So like I pay attention to all these theories, and I've gone deep into stuff about like what Jesus did in the missing 20. He disappears at 10 and then pops up at 32, right?
Yeah, 32.
He dies at 33.
Yeah, I thought he
pops up at
30. I thought there was 3 years in ministry. I could be wrong.
So there's 20 years that's kind of just like missing in the Bible, and I'm so fascinated about like what happened in those 20 years. And there's all kinds of theories, like he went to India. He went to America and started
Smith. All right, Mormonism. Here we go.
So yeah, like there's nothing that has really like compelled my heart. I'd say Christianity has gotten close sometimes. Like
Mm.
sometimes it's like just a feeling. Like I hear a Christian song, hairs on my whole body stand up. Christian music is the only music that I have emotional reaction to.
Mm.
And some will say that's the Holy Spirit talking to
Mm.
you and all this different stuff.
Yeah.
But then when I
Then you
look
do some
into
drugs and you're like, man, I feel really good on drugs too. So maybe it's all just in my head, you know? Like,
and sometimes I'll learn about Islam and I'm like, a lot of this stuff makes sense. I like the structure of the religion, the how like people take this shit serious. There's episodes of South Park that are completely banned. Like if you go to HBO Max and you go to like season 11, it jumps episodes. And it's because they were showing the Prophet Muhammad on as a cartoon drawing. But they actually put like a censorship bar over him in the episode because
over where?
over Muhammad.
No,
So
but like in
South Park.
in America though?
Yeah.
Like if you watch it, really?
So they were getting death threats because that's
crazy.
one of the things in Islam is you cannot depict the prophet. But that's how seriously they take the religion. Whereas I see like someone who follows Islam, like for example, one of my employees, he's 18 and he started working with us at 17 as a setter. Takes it extremely seriously, prays 3 times a day,
Yep.
etc. But then I see people who consider themselves Christian and have sex before marriage
Yeah.
and just don't really abide by anything.
I mean, I
of
think
their
Christians
religion.
are some of the biggest hypocrites.
So that's
on the whole
one of the
planet.
things I
Yeah, for
admire
sure.
about Islam.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay, maybe this is like
Yeah.
the path. But then there's certain things that don't make sense to me at all
Yeah.
about Islam. And I would say most things make sense to me about Christianity.
Yeah.
There's still a few things that are still questionable. Old Testament stuff.
Old Testament's wild, dude.
Yeah.
It's
like,
so crazy. You read the New Testament, you're like, oh, this is great. And then you read the Old Testament, you're like, what just happened?
yeah. Like, I tried to read Leviticus one time and
That's
I
a
was
fun
like,
one.
bro,
Yeah.
it was like,
Yep.
and I didn't knew almost
Or
nothing
Exodus,
about the
yeah.
Bible. I was like,
Yeah.
bro, Exodus is and Revelations scares the shit out of you. So
Yeah.
where you're like, it's like watching a scary movie pretty much.
Mm. You know what it would take in order for you to accept one as like, this is the truth? Like, do you know what would have to happen? Someone asked me a really good question one time, right? They were like, so you believe in the Bible? And I was like, yes. And they're like, you believe in Jesus? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, you're absolutely convinced? I'm like, yes. And they're like, okay, what would it take to convince you otherwise? Right? And like, I thought about that question for a long time. And at this point, I don't think there's anything that could. I've done my research and I've like gone down the path to like know what I believe. And I don't know if there's anything that could convince me otherwise. Perhaps, but I couldn't label it. So for you, like, is there anything that could convince you that one was the truth in any way?
I honestly think, as logical as I am, it would have to be like an emotional experience.
Mm.
Because if I tried getting into the weeds and just like looking at it from a logical standpoint and like who wrote the Bible, who wrote the different books, how far apart were they written, when were they put together, try to find like prove it scientifically. And I don't think that religion works that way. The same way that, love doesn't work that way. There's no test that you can say that you can 100% say like, I'm in love with this person based on this test.
Yeah.
So I think that as an entrepreneur, like, very logical, and I just don't think that this problem is going to be solved that way.
Yeah.
But I will say this, I did spend a lot of time going to churches, trying churches,
Yeah.
and I've seen people give their testimony of how the Holy Spirit has changed something in their lives. I've talked to people who've experienced miracles in real life.
Mm.
One time, my ex-girlfriend, which you knew, first one, Christian one.
Yep.
And we were meeting up with this like hardcore Christian dude. And he was like in the same business that we were in. We owned like tax businesses and stuff. This guy had never met her ever. Like I knew they had never met because I was introducing them. And he walks up to her and he's like, they meet for like 2 seconds. And then he's like, can I speak to you for a second? And we're in a hotel because that's where the event was. He takes her in like a hotel conference room. So events here, conference rooms over here, empty. Walks in, he's like, I don't know why I need to tell you this, but Jenny's going to be okay. Bro, she has a fucking cousin named Jenny that's going through all this shit And
Crazy.
like, it's not on, I didn't even know about this as her boyfriend.
Yeah.
It's not on her Facebook. It's not on anywhere. I didn't even know about her cousin Jenny. She starts bawling. And this happened like right in front of me. So I'm like, like how?
Yeah, how does that
like,
happen? Yeah.
So there's definitely unexplainable things like that.
Yeah.
And I've heard of, a million stories, as I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, if all this is a hoax, then how do you explain this, this, and this?
Yeah.
And I feel like as a logical person, the way that the Holy Ghost would speak to me is would be through stuff like that.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. Interesting. I want to come back to the story about your dad then, because I'm curious if that happens before we move on. But quickly, do you believe that marriage should be between one man, one woman, or like two people, right? Or like, what about the idea of like one guy having many wives or something like that?
Yeah, that's one
Like,
of
why
the
is that an
things
issue?
in Islam. They practice polygamy. Honestly, I think at the time just Joseph Smith wanted some hoes, and but I think that the way they justify it now,
it's so funny.
the way they justify it now is like, well, at the time they needed to grow the population and blah blah blah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that what makes a wife is the fact that there's only one. So I'm not against, like, I had a friend once, she had straight up two boyfriends and she lived with both of them. This is wild.
Wait, were the boyfriends in a relationship too? Or just,
No. So it was, they're probably still together. I just haven't talked to her in a while.
Yeah.
She was like in the online space and like very successful, like consultant on systems and stuff. So she lives in Atlanta. I started hanging out with her, go to her house. And I kind of had heard she was like this, but I'd never seen it. So I never asked, and I really didn't care.
Yeah.
Then I go to her house and there's two dudes there, and they kind of both look like each other too, which is funny. And and for her, I mean, that shit worked, and she was like the biggest advocate of it. I don't know how it's working now.
So crazy.
But yeah, like the dudes weren't with each other, but they were like friends, and they were both kind of with her, and she was kind of like the provider too.
That's all sorts of messed up, dude. That's like, do you see that story? The two girls, they were like, they shared the same body, but there's two heads. Like this, one of them got married. I'm like, how does that work?
Oh, I did see that.
Right? Like, what the heck? That's so crazy. Yeah.
So I think that for the polygamy argument, as a male, like the drive is always like, you got one penis and you can shoot off multiple times a day. So I think we were created in a sense to like be able to reproduce quite a bit. But I think, that's the male drive.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think what makes a wife is the fact that there's only one. So that's why I don't agree with like, having multiple wives. Although in Islam you can have up to 4.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Interesting. I didn't know it was specifically 4.
But and then there's also like, if you have any Muslim viewers, they're gonna hate that I bring this up, but Muhammad, he had a wife that was 6 years old, and in the Quran it says that he didn't have sex with her until she was, I think, 9.
So weird.
And I asked in
is it in the Quran?
Yeah, I asked a Muslim person about that, and his argument was like, well, the Quran said that she wasn't prepubescent, which is still just kind of strange to me in general. So that stuff like that is like, oh, that kind of just like turned me off right off the bat, because I've also, not to say that Islam is a cult or Christianity is a cult or anything like that, I've
But kind of we all
studied almost every, to me, the measure of a cult is what happens when you try to leave. So if they try to ruin your life or whatever,
so Mormonism for sure.
Then that's a cult. Yes,
for sure.
So
that's fair.
We can talk about Mormonism too, but so I don't believe, like, if you try to leave Islam, granted the Quran does say that if you switch religions, you should be put to death. And I would probably say the majority of Muslims agree with that.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
But to me, that's kind of like how I measure, like, is this actually a cult? And I'm looking into a lot of cults, so I'm very, very, I would say, well versed in almost every modern day cult, from like the Manson family to the Moonies to the actual Mormons that practice polygamy to this day, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones that had the largest suicide in history. So I've studied all of those and how they came to power and how they rose. And when you look at the characteristics, it always turns into the cult leader just having sex with everybody. And to me, that is always like, this is how you disprove that.
Oh,
You just, like all your ideology is out the window as soon as the cult leader just starts fucking everybody's wife. And like in one of these cults, the guy was like, I gave my wife up to sleep with other men and all this stuff, and now they're out of it, and he's traumatized and all this shit. And I see how they gain traction and how they start with people that are disenfranchised or weaker or homeless people. And I do see similarities with like if I was going to build, this is another reason why sometimes I doubt Christianity, because if I was going to build a cult, I would use a lot of the same elements of fear of like, well, if you don't listen to me, you're gone forever in hell. And if you do listen to me, your life is going to be so much better. And I thought about this from the perspective of like, okay, the majority of would you agree that Christianity started mainly with poor people?
Sure, for the sake of the argument, yeah.
So
mostly, yeah.
If I was trying to,
most of the world is poor, so
right,
yeah.
So, but if I was trying to control people, I would tell them, "Hey, you're poor, but your riches are in the afterlife, so you need to listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And your life sucks here because your life is going to be amazing later on." And that'd be it. And if you don't listen to me, then you're kind of screwed forever. And that's one of the things that kind of turned me off, because that's like a very cult tactic. Like that's a cult principle of like fear, and you're okay now, and the reason why you're poor is because you're gonna have so much more later on.
And just to be clear, that like that is the way that you just articulated that is sure, technically perhaps could be true, like it articulated. That's not actually what happened or is happening, in the sense of like, when you actually look at Christianity and you actually understand the whole concept of hell, it's eternal separation from God. And the reason, like, God wants you to have eternity with him, and the reason that you can't is because you're flawed, right? So it's like, it's not a matter of I'm punishing you because you are not choosing me, but rather, in order for you to spend eternity with me, like, I am perfect, therefore you must be perfect, right? So if you accept Christ, you become perfect and you can have eternity. So it's not so much a punishment, but rather it is a rejection of a gift. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So have you seen those videos of people talking about how they've gone to hell and come back?
Yeah, for sure.
Those are scary as fuck.
Yeah, for sure.
And I saw one in particular. He's like, there's no fire, but it's hot. Nobody has a mouth, but they're like trying to scream. You feel everybody suffering the entire time. It just sounds very, very brutal.
Well, that lake of fire isn't here yet. Which, by the way, is insane, because most Christians would tell you you're going to go to hell, which is a lake of fire. And if you actually read Revelation, because I did, I just knew, like, in the last 6 months, I read through it. I'm like, dude, the lake of fire is not even a thing yet. Like, hell is not real yet. According to the book of Revelation, it's still to come.
Interesting.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
There is no lake of fire yet. But anyway,
so
continue.
from my perspective, I'm like, okay, if I was God, like Neil deGrasse Tyson made an interesting point about this. He's like, do you think so? God is all good and all powerful, but he was like, when I look around in the world and I see people suffering and natural disasters and all these issues, it leads me to believe that he's either not all good or not all powerful. From that perspective, I'm like, okay, I think it's kind of just cruel to throw all these people in and into a planet, give them or know that they're going to have 1,000 religions, and then say, if you happen to stumble upon the wrong part of this maze and find something that works for you, but it's not necessarily what I set out for you, you're bound to eternal damnation. That's just seems kind of rude.
Okay, but once again, there's a missing element to that, because yes, he is all powerful, and yes, he is all good, and he is also just, right? All just. So if God is a just God, right?
He gives everybody the opportunity,
right? So like, at some point, and this is a core part of my belief, because believe me, I have wrestled with that exact question and nuances of this question bigly. But it's that every single person will have the opportunity to consciously, like, have the free choice to either accept or reject God, and know whether or not they're accepting or rejecting.
Right, but if you're born in Jackson, Mississippi, there's probably like 100% chance you're going to be introduced to Christianity before the age of 10. But if you're born in Iran, there's a 90% chance you're going to be introduced to Islam. And stick with that religion
and
for
quite
the rest of
possibly
your life.
never see Christianity.
So then does God just not give a fuck about people that are from Iran as much as he cares about people from Mississippi? Then it kind of becomes to the point where I'm like, this is actually kind of racist, because you're saying like, well, you know, white people, they're more likely to go to heaven because they were introduced to Christianity.
I mean, Jesus wasn't white, and like,
and then that's the other thing, like,
like,
the whitewashing of Jesus,
it's insanity
by like these European countries, and painting everybody as like this like blonde hair, blue-eyed person. And the most famous picture of Jesus is like a white man. And I've seen renditions or depictions of what he would actually look like, and he would look like a Middle Eastern kind of dude.
No, for sure. But once again, I mean, I'm not pretending to know everything, but if you believe that God is who he says he is, right, which would be he is all powerful, he is all good, he is all just, that would mean in some capacity, maybe it's in this life, maybe it is after death, maybe it was, I don't know when it is, right? But I firmly believe that every single person will have the ability to accept or reject him, like, and have that opportunity, even if they were never introduced to him.
I feel like that'd be more fair. Like if you die and then God is like, here's the truth.
Right. Like, and you can accept it.
Choose, But
also for someone like me, I think that, I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I think that my choice is here, right? Because I'm like, I had the option and I could accept it or I could reject it, right? So like maybe the person that never got introduced to it, maybe theirs is after death, but mine was definitely here, right? Like because I knew, and I had that. And I think the quote, with great knowledge comes great responsibility, right? So like, because I knew I had to make the decision, right? I argued with Dan Henry about this till 2:00 in the morning when we were down at his place, right? And it's funny because his videographer is an atheist. He's Muslim and I'm Christian, right? And we're arguing until like 2:00 in the morning, and he's like, so like, what do you believe? And I'm explaining to him Christianity and how in the end times, Jesus is going to come down and, you know, the skies are going to split open and he's going to bring this thing of angels or whatever. And he looks at me and he goes, do you know the problem with Christianity? The problem with Christianity is like, I know marketing, and that is, it's too good of a story, dude. Like
I agree.
It's a perfect, like, the reason that this can't be true.
You could also say God knows marketing.
Okay,
too,
but I'm like,
so he would
don't you think that the creator of the universe would tell the very best story? Like, it would be the very best thing, right? But what I would say to this is that I would say, like, yes, I do think that there are elements of cult in every religion, or there are, you know, elements in praying on a certain way. But what makes Christianity different, and we don't need to go into the actual details of this any further than this, but like what makes Christianity different is that there is, like, if you compare it against all the other religions, there are definite differences. For example, in no other religion did God or whoever or whatever that we define as God come down and walk among men. No one. Christianity is the only one. On top of that, not only did he come down and walk among men, he did not do it as a king. He did not do it in riches, right? He literally came down in the lowliest, poorest, brokest. He literally was born in a manger, right? There wasn't even room for him, you know what I'm saying? So he walked among the poor. He walked among those. We're talking like the God of the universe. He felt what it was like to be tired and to weep and to feel, and then goes to the cross, and like people literally spit on the face of God, right? Like that, like, what other religion, right? And there's so many things like that. When you look at it, it's that there is a fundamental difference on how it's played out. And I think that when actually looked at it closely, I've come to the conclusion that it best explains the human condition.
My old pastor taught me this. He's like, Christianity is the only religion where in every other religion, you kind of have to be good enough to climb the mountain and meet God. Mormonism, for example, like Mormons don't ever know if they're saved. That's why they're all so nice, because they're like, they're walking on eggshells. They're walking on thin ice. But he's like, Christianity is the only one where the guru kind of comes down from the mountain and walks with you, which is a cool concept. But I will say I learned about in Buddhism, the story of the Buddha, Siddhartha, was he was actually a prince, and he basically leaves his life and comes and hangs out with these people known as the untouchables, which are the equivalent of like kind of how we look at homeless people and like those homeless camps out here. So there's a book called Old Path, White Clouds. It's basically like the Buddhist Bible. And it's basically just all about his life. It's a really, really good read. And in Buddhism, it's not really like spiritual. Like there's not really any like praying. They don't really talk about the afterlife. I think it's very misunderstood. But in one of the scenes in the book, there's a hunter and he's wearing monk robes in order to lure in deer, because deer are used to seeing monks, so they kind of trust them. And he trades his king robes with the dude for his monk robes, and then that's kind of what he wears the rest of the book. So the untouchables are basically homeless people. They call them untouchables because if you touch them, you literally have to go like meditate under a tree for a couple days. It's nuts. But he actually ends up like, you know, befriending them. He touches them. Everyone knows he's like a prince or a king. So they're like shocked by it. And it's a very interesting story. There's nothing I refute or about Buddhism. All of like my experience at the monastery has been amazing. It's just not, I don't even, sometimes I'm like, is this even a religion? Because there is no talk of the afterlife. Even when I ask them, they kind of don't really get into it.
Do you believe there's afterlife? Life after death?
I would hope so, but I don't know. Like the even mathematically, sometimes I'm like, so if everybody has a soul,
you believe that?
Where do these, I don't know, where do these souls come from? Is there like a soul factory? Is everybody's soul new? Buddhists believe in a lot of them believe in reincarnation. And I'm like, mathematically, that doesn't make sense because eventually we would run out of souls to be reincarnated. And then there'd be people without souls unless there's new ones being made. So just stuff like that. I'm like, this doesn't really make sense.
Okay. We're going to shift gears from there and say, let's go to the business side of things. Okay. And I want to segue that with, I feel like not having a father has to play a massive role, or not having a father figure in your life, like your father in your life has to play a massive role with who you become and what you ultimately do. Because for context, I had a father who, like, my parents both stayed together, right? And it was like, I am very aware of how much of a blessing that was in my life and like how much that shaped who I am and how I view many, many things, right? My dad was on the road a ton. He drove, semi, still does, drive semi to, provide. When I was 11 years old, my parents packed us all in the back of an RV. We drove to a farm in the middle of Indiana and grew up there, right? And so like my dad was not home a lot. He worked a lot, but like he was in my life. I talked to him every single day. My parents stayed together and all that. And I can't imagine a world where that wasn't a thing, right? So I'm curious, that story, and then segueing that into how you got into business with that. Or how that led you to.
So first of all, I didn't meet my dad till I was 8 years old. And it was kind of funny too, the way that I met him. My dad, he hates when I talk shit about him publicly. But I really don't care because I don't talk to him anyways. But if he were to see this, he'd call my mom and be like, why is JR, saying this stuff publicly? And he just gets super pissed. But I'm like, bro, to this day, you've never apologized. Not once. Yeah. So, I ended up doing MDMA with my mom. And
oh my gosh.
And I asked her, and she explained to me, I've said this before publicly, so she's cool with it.
No, I'm actually my mom.
Oh.
Hey mom, you want to do something? No.
Dude, it's the greatest bonding experience you could possibly do with your parents.
Oh, so well, I did it with my wife, so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, and we've done it together.
Yeah, for sure.
This
a good time.
Excludes your possibility for being president now that you've admitted this.
I was never planning on being president, so we're good there.
Okay, one time you messaged me and you made me take something out of my podcast because you're like, I plan to run for office one day.
Oh, did I really? I definitely don't anymore. Man,
it was when I asked you if you tried Coke before, and you were like, yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah. One time, yeah.
You made me cut it out of my podcast.
Yeah. Man, I had a phase, man. I never did. It's so funny because like growing up, I mean, obviously no drugs, no alcohol, and I've never been into alcohol. But there was like a 6-month period where I was like, all right, I'm going to try some stuff. And to me, like weed was the end of the world. So I smoked some weed and I was like, that wasn't so bad. And then I did LSD.
Let's do heroin.
And definitely not. Definitely not. All right. But then I did LSD and that was awesome. I mean, that changed my life. And then I took one bump of Coke and I was like, yeah, no, definitely that would mess you up.
Dude, I've never tried it. Mainly because every person who's done it has told me not to try it if I haven't tried it. Every single no one's ever been like, we need to do blow together. It's so fun.
Yeah, no, it was just like literally one time, and I took a hit of it, and it was just like you could tell that this was, first off, you could tell it was super not good for you, right? Like you're like, wow, right? And I'm like, this could be so addicting so quickly. I was like, never again. But yeah, anyway,
you're actually selling it for me, but
definitely don't. Like I will never ever do it again. Yeah.
So back to the dad thing.
Yeah.
So we did MDMA. I asked my mom, tell me the whole story, start to finish. And she was like, I was living in New York City. She worked at like a vitamin supplement shop. My dad was like a regular there. He started hitting on her and they ended up, kind of dating. But this guy was married to someone else the entire time. She had no idea. And I triple confirmed with her that she had no idea.
Wait. Your dad was married to somebody else.
Yeah, bro had a whole kid, my older sister, half sister. He'd also cheated on his wife multiple. Bro, if he ever saw this, he'd fucking like. But if you do ever see this, like, own your shit. At least be like, yes, it happened. I'm sorry. I'm a different person now. Blah blah blah. Don't just like sweep it under the rug, because everybody in the family like looks at him as a fool because he has never owned anything.
Yeah.
And he kind of puts on this persona of like who he wants people to think he is. So anyways, he was married to someone else, had already cheated on her multiple times, and had 2 kids prior to them getting married with someone else. So actually 3 kids, two with one with another. So I have an older brother and sister, and then another older brother, and then another older sister. But from his marriage, there was one sister. That's the only one that I've ever kind of really spent time with. And I've gotten some context too from her. So when I was born, my mom called, my mom was pregnant. She called my dad. She's like, "Hey, I'm pregnant." He's like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And everyone knows when you say I'm pregnant and someone says, "What are you going to do?" Basically, you're telling them you should have an abortion.
Yeah.
So he's like, "What are you going to do?" And she's like, "What do you mean what am I going to do? I'm going to have my kid." And he's like, "Well," and she told me this verbatim in Spanish. Spanish was my first language. Both my parents were born in Dominican Republic. She's like, verbatim, he says, "Well, if you choose to have that kid, then don't count on me," in Spanish.
Crazy.
And bro, and also think of the perspective of my mom. Like, she came to the United States when she was like 18, 19, pregnant with my sister at the time. At this point, she's 33, and she's like barely getting by in New York City. And I was like, "Well, what happened after that?" She's like, "The day you were born."
Wait, where were you born?
New York City.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. She's like, "The day you were born, I took a taxi to the hospital. The taxi driver offered to help me in, and she was like, 'Nah, I got it.' And she's like, 'I walked in the hospital by myself and gave birth by myself.'"
Crazy.
And then like she like lived with a friend. Like in New York City, people like rent rooms and stuff because it's so expensive. And then my sister had gone to live with my grandma in DR. My sister's 9 years older. And then my sister ended up coming back. My sister was 9 years older, so my sister ended up kind of taking care of me and raising me for the most part.
In New York City?
No, we stayed there until I was like 3, I believe. And then we moved to Florida, Tampa, Florida. And we just always moved around. Like, we lived in New Jersey. I remember we lived in Las Vegas during 9/11. Then we moved, after 9/11, we moved back to Florida. Then we moved to Colorado for a little bit. Then we moved to Pennsylvania. And that's where I mainly grew up, 12 to 19, in Pennsylvania. But I have very vivid memory of my childhood. And overall, like, my childhood was actually pretty good. Like, didn't have a lot of money and stuff, but like at the time, in the early 2000s, late 90s, you really didn't, like, kids played outside.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot to even spend money on. Like, their video game consoles were like just coming out and computers weren't a thing. So everybody just played outside, rich, poor, whatever. This person might have a nicer bike than you or whatever, or it might take you a few months to get a bike. But ultimately, like, being poor back then wasn't that bad because there really wasn't that much stuff for kids to buy. But like vacations, we never did any of that stuff. I never even knew anybody that had a vacation until I was like in 5th grade. But overall, my mom killed it in terms of like providing and stuff like that. And I think that what I've learned is that me and my dad are very alike we look alike. He's an entrepreneur. He's been an entrepreneur. He's, very crafty, like figures things out. We have the same like sleeping habits. I go to bed very late. I wake up pretty late. I noticed that all when so from like 8 to, probably like 17, 18, I had moved to Pennsylvania when I was 12, and New York City, where he lives, is 2 hours away. So we started to hang out, holidays, birthdays, stuff like that. I'd hang out with him for a couple days. And I noticed now, being like a grown ass man, how much of the same characteristics I have from him. So I realized that, and a lot of people hate hearing this, but a lot of just success and your IQ level and your ability to figure things out is very genetic. So I think like my entrepreneurial drive and stuff like that, it still came from him. So I think had I had him in my life, maybe I'd be better off. But like there's a lot of things that I noticed in him that I probably would have picked up if he was around in my life. Like this guy's massively insecure. Like he wants everybody to kind of feel like he's the man. Like he loves status, to just so much. Like people talking shit about him is like his least favorite thing in the world. I noticed just in kind of growing up. That's why he would hate if he saw this, he would hate it.
Did like once you met him at 8, was he like in and out of the picture growing up, or was that like the only time?
He was still pretty shitty. Like, my mom never put him on child support, which I was like, Mom, come on, like you got to stand up for yourself. Like, this guy has a business. When I didn't go to his house, he came to visit me in Florida when I was 8. When I was 12, when we moved to Pennsylvania, 2 hours away, that's the first time I ever been to the guy's house. I go to his house. So this would have been 2006. This guy has a fucking TV in the outside of his refrigerator in 2006, when you only saw these on MTV Cribs. He was driving like a brand new BMW. He would lease a car, get a new one every year. Then eventually he got the BMW X6 when it was brand new. He spent a lot of time and energy working on his house. He had built a custom like club bar in his basement, the basement of his house. My mom had to chase this guy around for $250 a month, $200 to $250 a month. Like I'm talking calling him 3 times a day. Like, please, can you send $250? We need the money. I'm thinking this whole time, maybe, I grew up poor. So I'm thinking he doesn't have money either. Cause I think nobody has money.
Yeah.
But when I see his house and I'm like, bro, you have 3 cars. He had split the top of his house off. He's renting that out to somebody. He's living on the middle floor. There's like marble, like this entire wall of marble with a fucking 6-foot Michelangelo marble statue.
Dang.
And just like living in New Jersey, one of the highest property tax places in the country. His office was in New York City, but he would drive like 30, 45 minutes to his house in New Jersey. Super nice upper middle class neighborhood in New Jersey. And just super nice house. Yeah. I go in his garage, and this is what really pissed me off. His garage is like bigger than this basement, probably double the size of this basement, full of just shit, artwork, couches, like 6 different couches, all this artwork, all these boxes of just shit. And I was 12, and I still realized, like I picked up on this. I'm like, why are we had no running water for like 6 months one time. I'm like, you're fucking living large over here by yourself, and we're struggling, and you won't even send $200 is not a lot of money. At the time, I thought it was a lot of money. $250 a month, and we have to call this shit out of you. Yeah. And this is why, like, I have no shame in saying this because, bro, honestly, like, fuck you. Like, it was just such a slap in the face. As I learned this stuff growing up, and just realized like how he just kind of evaded his responsibilities without consequence his entire life, because most people didn't even know. They just knew him as like the charismatic business party guy that was always having a good time and was like super funny and charismatic and always took everybody out to eat and stuff. And, if it's in front of a bunch of girls or at an event or something, he's going to pay for everybody when it's $500-$600. So I just saw like all these different things. But I think the benefit to me was my mom crushed it, and I learned a lot just on my own. And I would say what he gave me, the only thing that he actually gave me was like, I think I got pretty good genes. Like I put on muscle pretty well. I would say I have a pretty good IQ. I'm ambitious, motivated, and that's just as a result of his sperm donation.
That's super interesting. I wonder how much though, because with genes, it can't just be just in the entrepreneur space or like how you think about things. Cause like, I mean, my dad is not entrepreneurial or like good with money or things like that at all. But like the things that I got from him would be like how he like deeply cares about people and like his desire to provide, right? Like that's like deeply ingrained in me, right? To like take care and protect. And then like things like that. But like certainly not in the entrepreneurial business side of things, right? Like I learned, my mind is so different than my dad's in that sense, right? So it's interesting how sometimes certain things get passed on, but certain things don't, right?
Yeah.
So then,
And
like,
also, I mean, when you mix, two people, it creates
yeah, that's true.
these
That's
new
true.
traits.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But I look almost exactly like him, and a lot of my
Yeah.
characteristics
Yeah.
are like, if I showed you a picture, you'd be like, that's definitely your dad. Like
Yeah.
it's almost funny that he tried to say I wasn't his son. And my mom also told me, she's like, when you were 3 years old, you met him again, and he still didn't buy the story. So my mom just pieced out. And the way we got reconnected with him, sorry, I left this out of the story.
Really good, yeah.
My mom ran into his brother in Florida, just by pure chance. And she had a picture of me in her wallet. This was probably the very, very early days of cell phones. So she showed my uncle, and then my uncle calls my dad, and he's like, you have a son in Florida. And then he came down like 2 weeks later, and that was the first time I met him in person.
That's crazy. I've never heard that story. That is fascinating. So how did you get into business? Because if there's anything else you want to touch on the dad thing, by all means,
I think that's the story.
Yeah. Because like, okay, so he's entrepreneurial. You've got some of his genes. You have a nice body, bro. Me on the other hand, listen, I'm good with my body. I'm skinny, but like, dude, we're bulking up. I have a goal. At the end of this quarter, I got to hit 175. I'm at 171. When I started working out, dude.
End of the quarter.
Yeah. We got 2 months, right?
Possible.
Yeah. 4 pounds. I'll be fine. Yeah. When I started working out with my trainer, 146, dude. I was 146.
That's embarrassing.
Embarrassing, right? So bad. But anyway, so you've had more than your fair share of success compared to the average person when it comes to entrepreneurship, right? And I mean, you share what you can share or can't share. Okay. So I've known you for like 8 years, and we basically started out roughly in the same spot, more or less, right? Like we were kind of coming up there together. And I've learned a ton simply by watching how you make decisions and think about things, right? And then we always sit down, and it was so funny when I invited you to come on the show. You're like, I just want to come over here. I want to drink wine and talk shit. I was like, all right, bro, come on, let's do this. What's your approach to business? Like, how do you think? Like, help me understand your mind, because it's fascinating to me when you think through things, and some of the advice that you've given me, I'm like, I don't know. I've heard that advice a million times. And then the way you explain it, or the way that you think about it, I'm like,
yeah. So I think the way I think in business, it's come from how I developed in business, and I guess starting on business, it was just like massive insecurity. Like but like at every turn, like I remember thinking like $100,000 a year was so like, you had to be like super smart, super special. And I was always ambitious, but I never considered myself like intelligent. Until I grew up, made a couple $1 million, and then I interact with a lot of people to see the intelligence of the average person. And I'd probably say, I don't know, I'm probably 20% smarter than average.
You're hilarious, bro. Bro.
To be like being objective, and that's how I'd probably rate my IQ probably around 120.
Okay, but hold on. Average or median, right? So like
median is 100 IQ. Average IQ 100. So
okay.
Super genius to me is probably
but is IQ the level? I mean, I know that's what we measure, but like
no, not at all. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would say I'm probably around like 120, 123.
Mm-hmm.
Elon is probably around like 170, 180 or something. Like
I'm gonna look that up. Keep going.
Yeah. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a plus 160.
What's Elon Musk's IQ? Now. Oh my gosh. What the heck? All right, let's see. It says between 155 and 160.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
call it 160,
I would say if the average person is 100, I'd say there's, my old boss used to say 50% of people are below average. Uh-huh. So half the country is below 100. Mm-hmm. And objectively speaking, like when I look at my reasoning, my problem solving, how long it takes me to figure stuff out, my mathematic ability, I'd probably put myself at like 120.
Okay.
And then I've done a little IQ test, but I don't know the credibility, and they always come up somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But I was
also
always
keep in mind you're talking to me that could. I mean, I think higher education or like structured, like testing thing is the most BS thing in the entire world. I could care less, but yeah, I think
right. But the
that.
IQ test
there you go.
measures your.
I'll accept it. Okay. 120. All
right. But I grew up kind of thinking I was kind of dumb because I did terrible in school. My GPA graduating high school was like 2.4. I was like really smart until probably like I was like 8, 9. I always was above average until like 8, 9. And then around 10, I just got very disinterested and then fell behind the average. So I always thought, obviously it makes sense. Like, you're not taught like problem solving makes money. You're taught like intelligence makes money.
For sure.
So I was very insecure because I was like, well, I'm not that smart. So the likelihood of me becoming rich is difficult. And that was probably the most harmful thing for me, because, and this is where I guess having a father that would have like taught me some of this stuff would have been helpful, because no one ever told me like, you don't need to go to college or you can make money without it or whatever. I had to figure all that stuff out by myself. But at every turn in entrepreneurship, I always thought I'm not good enough to do that. Like, I remember thinking like, well, I need to hire a salesperson, but I remember looking at that task as like climbing fucking Kilimanjaro, just hiring somebody to be able to do sales. And I thought you had to be like really good at it yourself and understand everything and be really good at leadership and know all these ninja sales hacks and stuff like that. And I remember looking at that, like, and now at this point, we've hired probably over 100 sales reps and we've just figured it out, and it's just a skill.
Yeah.
So now I look at things as like, that's just a skill that we need to figure out, because I've built confidence by overcoming all these different things one by one, and by hitting like $100,000 a year in gross, then hitting $100,000 a year in net, then hitting $100,000 a month in net, and then continuing to grow the company and overcoming all these different things. And all that has really just kind of built my confidence to when I realized, like, we built our company in 2 years. To this year, we're on pace to do over $7 million. This company did not exist in March of, I think we started it March 2022.
It's crazy.
So I didn't think anything of that, but when we've talked to like VC people and private equity people, and they're like, what you guys have done is not normal. Don't let anybody tell you it's normal. This is, super unique. You guys are savages. You're operators, executors, and like really, really smart people telling me this stuff. Then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I am like, pretty good at this, or I am a little bit better than the average person at these things. But I wish everybody could have like been inside of my mind in 2012 when I graduated high school, and 2013 when I started my first business, and on all the days where I was just a fucking lazy piece of shit. Like, I played Fortnite all day instead of I've canceled sales calls back in like, I was probably like 22, 23, 24 maybe. I've canceled sales calls to play Fortnite because I just wanted to. Like, no good reason. I'm dead serious.
I'm just gonna clip that and then like hope it goes viral and be like, JR says, I've canceled sales calls to play Fortnite.
I say this to say, like, I'm not the perfect entrepreneur. I'm not the most motivated person. I am, I'm slightly smarter than most people, I would say. But if you're listening to this podcast and you're an entrepreneur and you're seeking information, you probably are too. Like, because if you also, I don't want to sound like a cocky piece of shit when I say that.
Yeah.
But when you actually have exposure with the average person, meaning average 5 out of 10 on a scale of 10, 5, and you have conversations with them, if you are a person that seeks information like this and listens to podcasts, and you're probably smarter. If you're listening to this, you're probably smarter than the average person, 5 out of 10.
Yep.
So I think that if I've been able to do what I've done with no dad in the picture and all this stuff, and I really like having lived it, saying it and not having lived it with me, you're like, oh, this is crazy and it's special and this person's unique and he must be really smart. He must be really good at sales, business, blah, blah, blah. But that's why I love I have one friend that I talk to from my childhood, and he saw the whole thing from start to finish.
Yep.
And it's when you've kind of lived it, like, he doesn't look at me. He's like, yeah, he's proud of me. He thinks what I've done is cool, but he doesn't look at me as like, wow, oh my God. Because we've grown up together.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it, is like, I lived this shit and I saw like how many things I did and how many times I didn't quit. But I also saw the days that I fucking didn't take a sales call to play Fortnite. Yeah. And I just neglected my responsibilities, or I overslept on a meeting that was pretty important, or whatever.
Well, would you say, so Alex Ramosi, I don't know, I've seen the clip a million times, where he's like, they analyzed the commonalities between like the highest performers and the most successful people, right? And the 3 things that they found that were the commonalities were, number 1, they all had some form of superiority complex, right? Meaning they believed they were better than everybody else, and deserved more, right? That was number 1. Number 2 was they had crippling insecurity, right?
Mhm.
And self-doubt. And then number 3 is they had impulse control, meaning they had the ability to just stay massively focused, right? Like those were the 3 commonalities. And like you said, those things, I was like, yo, that is me, right? Like 100%, right? And like, I don't think a lot of people want to admit that, but like, would you say that those 3 things would be accurate? Like those things are accurate of you?
So massive insecurity, 100%.
Yep. Big
Like,
time.
bro,
Yep.
growing up, I was so, especially being poor, and like kids have shoes that your parents can't afford. Like bro, I remember one time remember Nike Air Force Ones?
Yeah.
So if you went to like Ross, they would come out with like the FUBU version of those. And I saw those there and they were $25. And I was like, oh, this is my time to shine. Like they look just like the Air Force Ones. So I thought I was going to come into school and like they looked like Air Force Ones.
Yeah.
It's like the same material, the same little holes on the front. There, I got the black ones and the white ones. And I got made fun of because they weren't Air Force Ones, but they looked like it.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, I think really helped me in the long run because it made me insecure enough to be like, I have something to prove.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of the downfall of a lot of people. You got nothing to prove to anybody. You're like, your parents have always been supportive of you, and you walked right into a really good job, and all your parents had all these connections for you. There's never really anything to prove. So there's never really anything to, you're not fueled by insecurity, and insecurity is like just like a really, really strong motivator.
Yeah,
I guess.
sure. Yeah.
So yeah, that one for sure. What was the second one?
You feel like you're better than everybody else. Superior complex.
I mean, I think I'm smarter than most people.
Yeah.
But
there we go. Okay.
Objectively speaking, like,
yeah, but like, how do you feel? I mean, right?
so the reason I say that is because my business especially is dealing with people, helping people get into investments. And I see how people run into just like one tiny little roadblock and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't for me, blah, blah, blah. And I just look at it and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like I would never do that. So when I see that, I'm like, obviously I deserve to have what I have because you run into one roadblock and you quit. And like you came from a 2-parent household, they paid for your college, and you run into one roadblock with your Airbnb or whatever investment. And you're like, this isn't for me. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm like, oh yeah, I deserve the fucking millions of dollars that I'm making because I go like strive through like all of my reasons why I think I'm better than the average person at certain things are objective.
But okay, but look at it in business though, right? Specifically in the lens of business, right? Like you're better than the average. You feel like you're better than the average person. Because so for me, right? Like I would say one of my biggest weaknesses, or one of the biggest things I struggle with, right? Well, 2. Number 1 is patience. Oh my gosh, dude, I'm so impatient, right? Except with my wife. She gets all of it. But is like empathy, right? Because like I remember growing up, and I remember like looking around at all of the people that I knew, whether it was, on the farm, or whether it was in the city, or like wherever. And like, I would look around and see how they made decisions, or see like what they were doing or what they were planning on doing with their life. And none of it made sense to me, right? Like I was like, what do you mean you're going to go and like get a good job or and you're going to just provide that way? Or like, what do you mean you're just going to like, nothing made sense. And I would ask these questions and I would be told that like, oh, like that's not how it is. I remember somebody in church told me I was going to hell because I got a tattoo, right? That was hilarious, right? But I'm like, I remember sitting there being like, no, you are all wrong. And I am better than all of you, and I'm going to prove it, right? And so because of, massive insecurity, yes. But like for me, when I looked around, nothing made sense on how the average person thinks. And I would say that while, as a Christian now, and empathy and loving other people is something I'm hugely working on, I understand that it's important. I feel like a lot of those feelings still the same. I look around at the average person and I go, are you insane? Like, are you like, how do you even come to these conclusions?
Mm-hmm.
And then like, I don't actually feel bad for them. Literally today, dude, I had someone reach out to me and they were like, we were DMing back and forth and they're like, can you help me refine my pitch? I want to get to $15,000 a month, blah, blah, blah. And like, I get those messages every single day, right? I never say yes, but I was like, sure, I'll hop on a Zoom call with you and show you how to do it. And his response was, I don't feel up for it.
No.
Right? Like I have a screenshot and I was like, okay, this is why you all deserve, like does that make sense? Does that make sense? Right? Yeah. So like, I feel like I do struggle with that, but I feel like it articulates it perfectly.
Yeah. Dude, so funny story. Dan Henry was the first course that I bought.
Shout out to the GOAT, Dan Henry.
Back in 2016. The course was $1,000. I had my first month where I made like $8,000. And at this point I was still associated with all my like friends from high school and stuff that were like, working at Applebee's or a warehouse or whatever. I screenshotted it and I put it in the group chat. And because at this point, like no one had reached out to me and been like, yo, like how are you doing this? Or how are you making money on the internet? I screenshotted it. I sent it to them. I said, hey guys, I'm only going to post this here in here one time. If any of you guys want, this is how much money I made last month. If any of you guys want help doing this, I'll tell you exactly how I got it. And one person in the group chat was probably like 6 people, 7 people. One person reached out on the side. I explained it to him and I was like, before I fucking help this person, let me put a hurdle in. So I'm like, hey, all you need to do is buy this course. It's $1,000. And it was Dan Henry's course. Like, yeah, man, I just really, I don't got that right now. And I'm like, bro, you smoke weed all the time. You have a bunch of shoes that you can sell. You still live with your fucking parents. You can figure out how to take out a credit card. You've sold drugs in the past when you want to get money for them. Like, I'm like, bro, if you're going to quit here, then I'd never talk to that guy again. And I saw that and I saw how only one, like, bro, if you grew up super poor and you're making 15 at the time. So some of them were making like $8 to $10 an hour working at like Applebee's kitchen. And then some of them had worked at like Amazon warehouse and they paid like 12, sometimes 13 if you work night shift.
Yeah.
So I don't know. How much money is that in a month? Like $3,000, 35, 2,500.
$12 an hour. So was that 12 times 40?
Yeah. And there was a decent amount of like overtime and stuff.
Right. Times 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Times 4. So no overtime, $1,920. Before taxes. Taxes.
So you're making $1,900 in a month working night shift at Amazon warehouse, which I did, by the way. Yeah. You're a fucking picker, which means you're walking through countless aisles and have a little shopping cart. You're picking shit off the aisle and you're scanning
I did it too.
it.
It's not for Amazon. I did it for hardware distribution.
Bro, that's the saddest. If anyone wants to feel grateful, do that job for one day. They hire anybody. You could like do that job one day, bro. When you see a 60-year-old grandma at 3 a.m. in an Amazon warehouse, you know it's because she has to fucking be there. And it's the saddest thing. It's the most heartbreaking thing ever.
Yeah, I would say I do have empathy for those type of people. It's the able-bodied, particularly able-bodied men, right? Like I try not to pick on women at all because I'm like, I don't know, I'm not a woman, right? But like for men, dude, if you're like 20 or 30, if you're in your 20s and your 30s, and you're like not making money or not like putting every amount of effort into putting yourself in a good position.
So imagine okay, you're making $1,900 before taxes. I remember my paychecks were like, I don't know, $400 a week. And your friend you're like, at this point, I'm 22, so I'm like 3 years removed from high school. Your friend who's 3 years removed from high school, didn't go to college, shows you a screenshot. Bro, I'd be like, bro, I'll suck your dick right now if you show me how to make this money. Like,
oh my gosh.
But nothing. So I'm like, y'all, yes, I'm better than you. Yes. In almost every fucking realm of any human endeavor at all. Yes. And to this day, like they work at Applebee's and it's so sad because if they knew how attainable it actually was just to have like a much better life and how you're not that far, like you're an able-bodied military aged male with at least like a brain and you live in America. You're this close, but this close is actually a lot when you're not even trying. So
impulse control. Dude, if there's one thing I know about you. Focus. Like I remember making fun of you for not wanting the phone. Like this dude literally took the lock off of his phone and had the focus so that he didn't have to unlock it like when you swiped up because it was like saving the half a second.
Dude, I did the math. Dude, you lose a lot of time. I have it now just because I have Apple Pay and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, you have to.
This was pre Apple Pay. This conversation.
Right. Yeah, but. And then like we had the conversation. It was like a couple days later, your phone was left somewhere. I know it wasn't your fault.
I lost my phone like 3 days later.
Or
no, it was like the next day. We were on a cruise.
We were on a cruise, right? And you left
and it wasn't locked, and it had no lock on it. But luckily, I got it back.
So impulse control, though.
Yeah. So on that note, I will say this: I am not the most disciplined person in the world by any stretch of the imagination.
You're certainly not the most punctual.
Definitely not. If I have to wake up early, it's like if I have to wake up at any time before like 9:30, it is the worst day of my life. I'm dead serious.
And he's going to do $7 million in revenue this year, guys.
And I will, but I think what I've learned about impulse control is that it is a muscle. And it's very, very like I heard this guy on Joe Rogan one time and he was saying like every time you try to quit you try to follow a diet and you fail, it helps you kind of build that muscle up next time. So with me, I just try, like, I'm in relatively good shape because I'm 6 foot, I'm 200 pounds, I'm pretty muscular, but I've failed at my diet so many times but I've just kept trying until it worked. And then I got a 6 pack. So, but I can't just like pick something up and be like, I'm going to do this every day and just do it. It takes me like failing at that thing so many times and continuing to try to be able to be disciplined at it. At this point, I've probably haven't skipped I have not skipped a single workout where I was like, I just don't feel like going, in probably 2 years, close to 2 years.
That's awesome. How many days do you work out?
4 to 5.
4 to 5, yeah.
I have a personal trainer though, so I know like he's gonna be there at the time.
That's the only way I could get in the gym. I hate the gym. That is, I hate the gym, dude.
Yeah, but that's to me, that's impulse control. Yep. Like I set up a system that I know I can't fail at.
Yep.
And now the gym is such a habit that, like, bro, today I sprained I don't know what happened to my pinky. I messed it up playing basketball. It's all fat and swollen. I just showed up to the gym and I didn't think about my pinky because I literally can't grip a weight right now. And it didn't hit me until I was at the gym. Because it's just such a habit to go to the gym at this time every day. Then I got there and I was like, oh shit, how am I gonna work out today? So I did like a modified workout where I did like rower and sprinting and all this stuff. But this point it's harder for me to not go to the gym than it is to go to the gym.
Okay.
And people used to say that, and I'd used to be like, that just sounds so like esoteric and like not real.
Yeah.
But that's become that for me. And with my diet, it's the same thing. Like I fail. But then once I stick to my diet for 10 days and I don't drink or whatever, now it's just so easy to keep going.
Yeah.
So I've just learned a lot about myself and my psyche.
Yeah.
And I know how to hack my psyche to get it to do what I want.
Which I think is huge, right? Like I think you have to be able to know how your body, or know how you operate, and build systems around that essentially trick you. I mean, like, but support, support. Right. Yeah.
But waking up early, like I've been trying to become a morning person my entire life. I've not succeeded.
Okay.
I have not succeeded at all.
Okay. So with that, I think the question I was going to ask you in this one, this is a perfect segue into it. So one of the lessons that I took from you, because I watched you build a business in the last 2 years. It's awesome, right? Like, and like friend to friend for a second, bro, super proud of you, right? like seriously, it's been really, really awesome to watch. And so one of the things that you told me when you were up, I don't know, we were upstairs, a couple months ago, maybe it was 6 months ago, 7 months ago now, or whatever, when you were like, dude, like, just focus, like just do the one thing, and like just do, like cut out everything else and just do that, right? Just one thing, and the market is deeper, it's wider, it's all the things, right? For the average person right now that is not a complete loser and wants to change their life and they want to make money, right? And maybe they've been an entrepreneur for a while, or they've been trying some things and whatever, they make 100 grand and whatever, but they want to like go, right? They want to like change their life financially or whatever. How did you finally decide on your thing to where you're like, this is the thing that I'm going to do, and ultimately get yourself to commit? Because it's really easy in theory, right? But like, what were the actual steps to go, and what did that process look like to say, I'm going to commit to this and go all in?
Yeah. So have I ever told you the story of how I made my first $1 million revenue in 1 year?
Maybe, but I don't think so. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Okay. I was at the point where a lot of people watching probably are, where you're like, maybe I should do drop shipping. Maybe I should do real estate. Maybe I should start an agency. Maybe I should start a podcast. And you kind of dabble in each one of them, and you kind of get nowhere. And then you just keep jumping from thing to thing. That was me. And I realized that actually Sam Ovens was the first person I heard talk about like focus back in 2018. And he talked about how people that are starting multiple businesses, usually they're poor, and people who have
sounds like him,
people who have their phone number in their email signature, that's the easiest way for him to know that they're poor. And he just started talking about deep focus. So I sat down and I literally wrote a contract that said, I will stick to this opportunity for the next 6 months, or I will donate $5,000 to the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, I do remember this because you gave the check to.
I gave the check to Sema.
Yeah,
and she still has a picture of it. So and I was like, okay, I got to stick to this one thing for 6 months. I can't do, and I was very specific. I was like, I can't do this. Like it was like no podcasts unless it's related to growing this thing. No events unless it's specifically related to helping this business. No, and I listed out like no drop shipping, no e-com, no whatever, no new offers.
Yeah.
And I picked the thing by like, I at the time I had a little audience, like maybe like 3,000 person email list, and I was posting on Facebook a lot. So I surveyed the audience, and 80% of them were trying to start or running a marketing agency. And then 20% of them were like trying to be like coaches and consultants, stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to develop a program for these 80% of people. And there was already a lot of programs out there.
Yeah.
So I ended up changing my offer up and working with virtual assistants for marketing agency owners. And I signed this contract probably September of 2019, I want to say.
Okay.
First seven-figure year was 2020. During COVID.
During COVID,
Yeah. Like it was like the heart of COVID. I'm selling like a marketing agency offer and it's popping off. From the day that I signed that contract, the first month that I did $30,000, which for me was a huge milestone, was March. So from September to March, I was kind of dabbling like $6,000 a month, $12,000 a month. And then March did 30K, April did 50, May did 80, June did over 100, and that became my first seven-figure year.
Yeah.
And then when I look back, I identified the things that you miss when you don't focus. So for example, I never really tracked my metrics. I would just like run ads, and then I would see like, does this feel profitable? Like, well, how much did I spend? How much did I make this week? But it was so flawed because like the money you're making this week are from ads you ran 2 weeks ago. So when I was just sitting there and I was like, okay, what can I do to like figure this out better? I start building out a spreadsheet that helped me track my media buying. That was one of the biggest things that helped me get from like 10,000 a month to 100,000 a month, is just tracking meticulously like our sales calls, our ad spend, which platforms were working the best. And I remember my first week where I spent $600 on ads and made 12,000. And I saw it on the sheet and I was like, bro, this is like, I figured this shit out. Like I'm going to be a millionaire. And that feeling when the light bulb goes off and you're like, I'm going to be a fucking millionaire. Like, but you're like probably like 6 months to a year out, but you're like, the formula is here.
Yeah.
I would not have seen that without tracking. The second thing was I was like, okay, what skills do I need to make $1 million a year gross? That was all I wanted to do. $1 million gross. If I could take home like 300-400 grand, I was like chilling. So of the skills that I could identify, I was like, sales is one. Going a layer deeper, sales leadership, which if it's between being good at sales and sales leadership, I'd rather be good at sales leadership. Very different skills. I've seen it's hard to convert somebody who's really good at sales into a really good sales trainer. So I was like, sales leadership. And then I was like, copywriting and offer creation. I was like, if I could be top 10% in the world in all these skills, which I thought about, I was like, okay, how realistically, how hard would it be to be top 10? So top 1%, I would say like Russell Brunson and people like that. But then I was like, okay, most people aren't even trying to be good at this skill.
Yeah.
So if I just tried and let's say I treated it like a job, I put in like 40 hours a week on just this skill, how long would it take reasonably to be top 10% in the world? And I was like, probably like 4 to 6 months maybe. So I go on Amazon, I order every copywriting book. And then I'm like, okay, how can I get better at sales training? I found a program of a dude who I thought was a pretty good sales trainer, and I invested in the program. It was like $6 grand. And then I bought all these copywriting books, call it $1,000. And then I bought a Frank Kern product, and the order bump on the product was $35. And it was like, I don't even remember what the product was. I never went through the actual product, but the order bump was like, get 2 days of my $30,000 mastermind recordings for $35, $37, something like that. I click it. I'm like, oh, hell, fuck yeah. And then I just go straight to watch that. And it's Frank Kern giving a 2-day seminar on copywriting to his people that paid $30,000. And then the people in the room, they were like, his clients had sent their copywriters to learn how to write copy from Frank Kern. And I remember I walk, bro, I'm like, it's like you open just a chest and it's just gold in there.
Yeah.
So I see that it's 2 days long. I'm like, I'm going to sit down this weekend and I'm going to watch this shit. Like actually watch it. I'm going to do all the exercises. And I ended up doing it. And I remember in the funny thing about the recordings were in the recordings, he's like, he's like, yeah, I'm probably going to sell this one day, but no one's going to actually watch it because people don't ever do anything ever. And then I'm sitting there laughing my ass off in my living room. So I sat down, I watched this whole thing. I like put my phone on do not disturb airplane mode all weekend.
Yeah.
I watched it. I do the exercise, and I used that copywriting training to create my video sales letter. And that video sales letter completely changed my business. And that's when we had our 30K month. So tracking and getting my messaging right and my offer right. I changed my offer based off his advice in this recording is really what took me to 7 figures. So to recap what I would do if I was the average person, I'd be like, okay, what are some skills that I could easily attain? Because you got to think like, it doesn't take 4 years to get good at sales. It probably takes like 6 months of like max of like taking sales calls, listening to them back.
Yeah. Well, I also think just the volume. I mean, Alex Ramosi says it. It's like if the average person is doing this much in a week and you do, right? Like you can collapse that a lot faster.
I really didn't even do that, man. Like Hermosi talks about, he's like, I've done 1,000 calls or whatever. He's, I would say, top 1% of humans ever.
For sure.
I'm probably,
but I just mean the concept of being able to speed up the success that you have is like, okay, you could think of it might take 6 months. What if you just doubled what you would do in that time? You could do it in 3 months type of deal, right?
Yeah,
you know
but also
like,
realizing the average person has had like a week of training on sales, if that ever, at some corporate job that they had or something. Like I sold franchises for a public company. I'm thinking I'm coming into a public company, 4,000 locations nationwide. I'm thinking they have like a very structured and rigid sales training program. The sales training program was like, sit with this person for a week, watch what they do. Now sit with this person for a week, watch what they do. Now sit with this person. And they all did everything differently. And none of them had ever been trained on sales. So I'm like, the average person's never had any training. So if you just sit down and you're like, okay, 2 hours a day or even 1 hour a day, I'm going to listen to sales training material. And for 1 hour a day, I'm going to take sales calls. And then 1 hour a day or 30 minutes a day, I'm going to listen back to my calls. And I'm going to do this every day, 5 days a week for the next 90 days. You will get a lot better. So the funny thing about the skills that make money is that they're not incredibly different. It's not like being a neuro. Like I watched a TikTok last night of this guy. He's like, I love like medicine for some reason. I just love learning about medicine, hearing doctors talk, learning about procedures, stuff like that. So I have all these like medical people served to me on TikTok. This guy, he was a heart surgeon and cardiac thoracic surgeon, I think is the term. And he has a video about how long it took him to do that. It was 16 years to then he probably makes, at this point, he's well in his career, is probably making close to $1 million. He probably came out of medical school making like 300-400 grand.
Crazy. 13 years.
But you could make 400 grand a year if you just get really good at sales and you figure out how to build an offer. So I got my skills together and then I was like, okay, what else am I missing? Media buying. And I'm probably like decent at media buying. Like we have a media buyer now who's amazing. But I just learned kind of the basics of that and okay media buying with proficient sales, with proficient copywriting and offer creation. Boom, $1 million. And this was from like a couple months before when I was like, okay, I want to actually try to make $1 million a year now. Because for the longest time, back to the insecurity thing, I was too insecure to even try. For risk that I would fail. And in my mind, I was like, I was always protected by like, well, if I did try to make $1 million, I could. And I just don't feel, I just don't want to try because I'm comfortable right now or whatever. Like all this bullshit like that I had to work through. And the second I decided that I wanted to make $1 million and I thought it would happen right away. And because I had kind of told myself that story and it ended up taking from September to May to get on track to make $1 million. Which I mean, in general, is not that long, insanity, but it felt like, oh, the second I try, I'm just gonna make $1 million.
Like I grew up thinking that the way to make money was with a business. I didn't understand that there was a difference between running a business and making money. Like you can be great at making money and terrible at running a business, and vice versa, right? Like you sell some stuff, you make some money, right? So like for the average person, from a principal level, like third grader, right? Like what are the fewest amount of components necessary of how to go make money? In my head, there's literally 3 things that are required. There's like one thing and then 3 steps, right? It's like you literally have to be able to solve a problem that somebody else has. That's it, that they will pay you for. That is literally it, which means you need 3 things. Number 1, you need something to sell them. Number two, you need a way to sell it to them. And number three, you need someone to sell to. That is it, right? Like to me, like if you just figure out those three things, you can get to a point where, because like to me, making $1 million is step 2 or level 2. Step 1 is literally be able to go and whenever you want, go make a sale, right? Because that won't get you to $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like step 1 is figuring out how to sell something and make money on command. Then step 2 would be go to $1 million or whatever that number is. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say most people, what I've noticed, the crazy thing is that most business owners don't ever even really try to come up with a predictable way to get a sale.
So insane.
Talk to any business owner in America that runs like anything, an insurance agent, a car salesman, whatever. How do you get your customers? Oh, I'm 100% word of mouth. I'm 100% word of mouth. And they say that with like such like pride. I'm like, bro, you don't have a single way where you could spend $100 to get somebody to get a click or an opt-in or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's like they've never even thought about coming up with a predictable client acquisition strategy. So I think that's when I heard like 5% of people ever make it to $1 million gross revenue, 5% of business owners. And I think that's why, because they never even really try
Like
to
in a
come
year?
up with
Yeah. I thought it was like 2%.
it's some low
Yeah.
percentage because they never try to come up with a predictable way to acquire a customer.
Yeah.
So I think once you have the thing to sell and you figure that out, which like I was helping Phil's little cousin. He calls me his cousin now too. and like we'll be on the phone. They're like, so I'll hear someone like, Mason, who are you talking to? He's like, my cousin. He's 13. We're trying to like teach him entrepreneurship. This kid is a savage at he negotiates and trades sports cards. I've gone to events with him, and this kid learned negotiate better than me at negotiating. Like he'll be like, how much for this card? They're like 80. He's like, I got 40. They're like, I really can't go below 80. 40. Nah, man, I really need 40. Nah, I can't. I'll pass. And he just walks on to the next person in like 10 seconds. And he asked me like, do you think I should get a job at Chick-fil-A this summer? Cause he's turning 14. So he'll be able to legally get, and he lives in California. So, you know, they're paying crazy wages out there. Yeah. And I was like, bro, you're really not going to learn anything at Chick-fil-A, to be honest. Yeah. Why don't you start a power washing business and buy a power washer, pressure washer, whatever, go door to door. And you're 13, like use it to your advantage. Like people are gonna be like, oh my God, wow, this is so cool. Make little business cards, put your phone number on it and go door to door and charge people like $300 up to the size of their driveway. He starts watching all these YouTube videos on like how to power wash. And I ask him, I'm like, so how much are you going to charge? He's like, well, it depends on the size of the driveway. And I was like, well, what would you charge like for your grandma's size driveway? He's like, oh, that one's pretty big. It'd probably be like $900. So he watched all these videos on pressure washing, figured out the ins and outs of it, how to start the business, how to price a property. And he's 13. But at 13, like no one's ever told him like he can't do something yet. Whereas like I see that and I see how he picked up this opportunity. Like granted, I made the suggestion, but he did the research and he's like starting to see the vision. And I'm like, you should be ashamed of yourself if you can't figure out something like this in America.
Do you think that everybody can though? Like, bro, like
it's back to the genetic thing. I know that some people just aren't entrepreneurs. Like my girlfriend, very, very good at ops, but would not be able to start better than me, better than anybody I've met at operations of a business, creating systems, stuff like that. Yeah. Would not be able to see an opportunity and be like, let's build a business and sell it. And I think that's probably just in how she grew up and genes. But for most of history, most people were entrepreneurs because everybody like, there's a farmer, there's the merchant, there's the horse raiser guy. So everybody had to kind of be an entrepreneur. So I think it's just deeply ingrained in the human DNA.
Like, because my thinking is, I mean, this goes back to the average person's an idiot, right? I mean, but like I firmly believe, I'm like, can anyone learn, right? Unless you have a literal like mental issue, which those are very real, but as long as you don't have a literal mental issue, you have the ability to learn, right? So I'm like, I think the biggest thing that I don't understand, and perhaps this is perhaps we'll end on you expounding on this, right? But is like, I don't understand how somebody can look at the life that they're currently live and not like it. And they go, I don't like my life. I don't like my situation. And they have access to a cell phone or the internet or live in America and not piece together the fact that like they can learn how to go and change it. Like that doesn't, my brain cannot understand how that's possible. Right. And so I'm like, I mean, I know your girlfriend. I guarantee you, if her back was against the wall, like she would figure out, go watch YouTube videos, blah, blah, blah. And like, okay, she might not build a massive business, but like she could figure out how to change her situation, right? My wife, same thing, right? It's like, so like for the average person to sit there and not like where they're at in life and then not go take the steps necessary to go and change that or learn what's necessary, I don't understand that in any way, shape, or form.
Because it's something that's natural to me and you, that's why I think it is very heavily genetic.
Is logic genetic? Like
I would say so.
Really though? I mean, maybe so.
I think more things are genetic than like recently I've started to feel like more things are genetic than most people think.
Do you believe that in concept that anyone, forget the genetic thing, but like anyone in America, if they are an able-bodied human being with normal mental health and they have access to a cell phone, that anyone could go out there and have could go out and make $1 million regardless of their situation?
I think anyone could make, if you have at least average intelligence, if your IQ is 80, you're probably fucked, to be honest. But if you're at least average 100 IQ, I think you have what it takes. So to think of like what we did to make $1 million, let's say,
okay, a couple $100 grand, like enough to change their
I think
life.
a couple $100 grand, anybody could, a fucking idiot could, I think 80 IQ, you can make a couple $100 grand a year, because it's not about being smart. It's about, like, I've seen people, like you saw Wolf of Wall Street, the people who stumbled into Jordan Belfort's office, they just kind of stumbled into the right opportunity. He taught them a few things that worked well, like tonality and stuff like that. And they basically just mimicked that and they made a couple $100 grand.
But like, so intelligence aside for a second though, like no matter where you're at, no matter your situation, right? You could be broke or homeless or whatever. Like if you are not mentally ill, right? Like no matter where you're at, like if you focus and have over a long enough period of time, there's nobody that is destined to poverty forever, right? Like they have
in America,
right? That's what I'm saying, in America, right? Yes, right? Okay.
Yes.
So then if that's the case, then the only other major variable besides someone intentionally trying to prevent you to doing that, right? Like literally singling out you, being like, no, I'm going to make sure that you don't, right? Besides that, right? The other variable would then be genetics, right? Like how you're wired. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say so.
So then either genetics play a role into whether or not someone can figure something out. And like, there's not a single person that I've like, you can't watch a YouTube video and understand a basic, like, you know what I'm saying? Like the average person can watch a YouTube video and learn. I mean, like literally you can Google, I mean, you can watch Alex Becker go build a store in real time that makes $10,000 a month, literally from scratch, drag and drop, like click here, go here, do there. Right. And I'm like, how does genetics play a role to prevent somebody from being able to literally click and drag and drop? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's not just that. It's like when you run into a roadblock, are you somebody that's going to like persevere? Or when you are faced with like complicated problems or common sense issues, are you somebody that can like figure out, or are you a problem solver? And the thing is, like, throughout history, what humans don't have is, right now, if you're a lion, you're probably pretty good at being a lion. If not, you would not have survived. Society's pretty easy right now to where you could be a fat piece of shit and you're not going to die. So there's theories that humans are actually devolving because only the best lions get to mate because they survived and they're the strongest or whatever. It's also my theory on why black people are better at sports, because when you enslave an entire race of people and you put them on a boat, the ones that survive that are going to be the genetically strongest ones. And then they mate for a couple hundred years and you end up with Tyreek Hill. Yeah. So so I think that it's kind of the same thing. So for humans, we're at the point where, like, you know, you can be a fat lazy piece of shit. The government will take care of you.
When I look at society today and I'm working on empathy and I'm like, I want to live more like, Jesus and taking care of people in need and everything like that. And we're very involved in our church and helping the underprivileged person. But when I look at society today and I look at how people choose, particularly like people that are like, I'm not even talking about the average idiot, right? Like, or, the person that's homeless or like whatever. I'm talking about people that like, they have jobs or they're in wherever, church or not church, or like hanging out with friends or like whatever. I'm like, there has not been a single good argument to me that is like, if you want to change your life, you can't. I'm like, what do you mean? Like that there's no, and people are like, Josh, not everyone's built like you. I'm like, you do not have to be built like me, right? Like you and I are built obviously different than the average person, but like, I don't think that there is a valid argument to say that the average person cannot fundamentally change their life literally by going and watching YouTube.
The average person, yes. I will say there are environmental factors
Then change it.
That make it incredible. Like, okay, I grew up in the fucking hood.
Yeah.
Okay, I was always like, everybody can change their life and all this stuff. But when you meet somebody who grew up without a dad, luckily I got very lucky that I had a great mother.
Yep.
But grew up without a dad. Mom's a fucking crackhead.
Yep.
They've been sexually abused in the past.
Yep.
And everybody they know is in and out of jail. Stealing is the only way that they can make money or get food, or selling drugs or something like that. It is just, if I had grown up in that rough of environment, would have been a lot harder. There's definitely people who've made it out.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that they can, but I'm not talking about that person. Like, I'm talking about the person. I mean, that's like extreme situation.
I mean, those people aren't listening to this podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast, you can be a fucking millionaire.
Like,
I'm 100%
like
sure.
What? Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's my biggest issue. That's why we're friends and, the people that we hang out with. But what's your philosophy on the American society today and how people choose to live their life? Or not even philosophy. What's your opinion?
I mean, my opinion's skewed because I live in Denver, like very liberal place. We had a guy today tell us that my business partner, he rented a Cybertruck, and this guy at the gym came up to him and said that Elon Musk's a fucking loser and he's a huge Bernie supporter and all this stuff. And the Cybertruck is horrible and all this shit. So my opinion is a little bit skewed, but one of the best things I think I've done to really draw perspective in my life is go on Reddit and just read. Because, okay, the people we hang out with are not representative of the average American.
I'm very aware. Yeah.
We hang out with people that, like, I don't even know anybody really that makes less than like 6 figures.
Yeah.
Most of my friends make 7 figures, some 8 figures.
Yep.
So my immediate reality is skewed by the people that I hang out with. But when I go on Reddit and I go into like these subreddits of like are liberal, conservative, there's one called frugal, which is just people trying to find ways to be frugal. There's one called real estate, that's like real estate from the perspective of the average person, talking about how they'll never be able to afford a home and it's so outside the realm of possibility. And just seeing these conversations that the average person is having, and then you get to see people's thoughts, and then you get to see the average person's reaction to their thoughts. And it's such a fascinating thought experiment, because being rich for a while, you do lose touch for sure. For sure. Because everybody you start to hang out, like I drive a fucking Lamborghini. I don't know the price of gas right now. I haven't been to a grocery store in forever. I use Instacart for everything. I have an assistant that picks up my returns and takes them to the post office. My assistant schedules Zoom calls with my mom once a week, and she books my massage at my house once a week, and she communicates with my personal trainer, and like all this shit that like to the average person would be crazy. So you do lose touch. It's even me, like having grown up super poor and knowing what it's like to like be paycheck to paycheck your entire life. My first car was a 1994 Toyota Corolla. My second car, that shit took a shit. Then I had a 1989 Chevy Celebrity. So I thought like I would always remember where I came from and blah, blah, blah. But there is things that are massive inconveniences to me that I would have been a privilege when I was poor. Like when I got on a plane, if I had to sit in between 2 people and there's no first class, or for some reason I have to take a Frontier flight or whatever, it's like, I'm like, oh, fuck this. I can't wait for that. Like I hate traveling. When I was 10, 15, 20 even, I was so happy just to be on an airplane. So you do lose touch.
Okay. Yes, I agree with that. And like, keep in mind, my perspective on this is like when I'm not, I don't think it's morally wrong to be where people are poor. I don't think being poor is morally bad, right? I don't think being broke is morally bad. I don't think being stuck is morally bad. I don't think that's morally, I think it's just a representation of your choices, right?
Mhm.
So like, I look at that, and whenever someone's like, Josh, you're losing touch with reality, I'm like, yes, that is the point.
You're losing touch with the poor reality. But like,
That's what I'm saying, right? I'm like, and I mean, I love my mom to death. I have an amazing relationship with my mom, right? And we battle. I mean, we go back and forth on stuff or whatever. She's like, Josh, you're losing touch with, and I'm like, yes, mom, because I don't want to be there, right?
yeah,
And so and I think that is like my message to people, and like how I am choosing to live is, I'm like, if you want to stay where you are, amazing. Like if you are fine with being where you're at, amazing, right? But like, who wants to, like, if you don't want to stay there, like, why is losing touch with reality a bad thing? Why is losing touch with how the average person lives their life
yeah,
a bad thing? Does that make sense? Like, I'm going to be charitable when I'm charitable. I'm going to go and be with the fatherless and the afflicted. And I mean, we donate into charities, and like literally my church funds SWAT vans to go that save children from, or women or girls from sex slavery, right? And like restores them back into things. And like we donate to, like, we do those things, but I'm not talking about those people. Those are people in poverty and in need, and not poverty, in actual need and need help.
Mhm.
Those people, I'm like, they need help. Yes. But like for the average person, why would I want to live the average life? You know, does that make sense? And I know that can sound insensitive, but then I watch someone like you, and I'm like, you seem to be more balanced on it. Like you seem to have a more healthy perspective on it than mine. And I'm like, oh, you're further along in the success ladder of business and financially than I am, right? And also you seem to have a better perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought about it a lot, and when I was like 22, I was like, everybody that's poor, it's their fault, and fuck them, and all this shit. And
I don't feel about that. I mean, yeah, but yeah.
But now, like, it was okay. One time I was in Atlanta, we go to not Waffle House, IHOP.
Yeah.
One of the only places open like 24 hours. And my two friends, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Mhm.
We were at the strip club before this, and Magic City, and my two friends are outside for a while, and I remember I walked in, I was like, this place looks kind of hood. I asked the waitress, I'm like, has anyone ever been shot here? And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, wait, but like in here? She's like, oh yeah. And then my friends are outside, so I'm like, what the fuck is going on? They get in a car with a stranger and they're smoking weed at 4 in the morning at IHOP. And she was a Uber Eats driver, and she was waiting for someone's order. It was taking for a while. So they just like started talking to her, start smoking weed with her. She basically tells a story of like how she's been raped by her uncles repeatedly.
Yeah.
And all this crazy shit. And I was like, okay, I know that she probably has the intelligence to do something more with her life.
Mhm.
But it's like the whole thing about when elephants are babies, they put chains on them, and then they keep and they try to break the chains and they can't. And then by the time that they're an adult, they put chains on that they could easily break, but they never do. But I think a lot of people in poverty are just a victim of that. Like they've just had these chains where like, bro, I remember finding out that I had a friend. And then when I started doing taxes, I did her taxes.
Mm-hmm.
She made 50 grand in a year. And I was like, yo, I didn't know your parents were balling like this. And his dad also made like 40 grand. Stepdad made 40 grand. So I saw a combined income of 90 grand, and I started doing taxes at 18. So I started to see this stuff. The average person that came in, they made under $20,000 a year. I was doing taxes in the hood.
Yeah.
But his parents came in and they owned their house.
Yeah.
They had, the home interest deduction. They made $90,000. And I just remember thinking like, yo, your parents are balling. Like I'd never seen that much money on a W-2. I remember the first guy I ever saw that made six figures, this Indian dude who sold life insurance, and he came in and his W-2 said 120,000.
Yeah.
And I was shocked.
Yeah.
Shocked.
Okay. But like in the example of the girl, like, was raped or that, like, these are extreme examples. Right. And I'm like, I have empathy for that person. Right. Like,
right. But that's not the average person.
I'm talking about, like, you live in America, and like, if you complain about your life, I mean, I totally get, like, I mean, I believe in generational curses, and I believe that there are people that horrible things. And I am not talking about those people. Right. And I know at the beginning I was, you're kind of having a conversation kind of like that, but I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I want people to look at my life, and, I told I host a Bible study at my house every Wednesday. Right. And, it's been a very convicting thing, by the way. But like, I told them, I'm like, people, like young men and young women, like their examples are Andrew Tate or like transgender people. Right? Like that's basically like the extremes of this. And I'm like, I want to be somebody whose life that you can look at and like you can be like, I want to be like that person. Not because I'm great, but because I follow biblical principles, right? And when I look at the average person today, I go, you have been blessed and given with you live in the most prosperous time in the history of ever to be alive, whereas the easiest ever to make money. You have talents and skills that God has given you. And we've talked about the verse, where it's like been given these talents. And I'm like, and you are going to complain or you're going to act like you can't change your reality in your life. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. And I'm like, I feel like you're taking this gift and you're literally throwing it before Swan. I mean, God's giving it to people that you're not being a good steward in any way, shape, or form. I don't have any sympathy for those people. Right. And I look at them and I'm like,
no, I agree.
Take responsibility for your freaking life. And like, I think that you can go and be in a pretty bad spot. I'm not talking about being raped and all that, but you can be in a pretty bad spot. And like, at the end of the day, guess what? You're there. That's the reality. Like, that's where you're at. And it's like, that sucks. It sucks, right? It would be nice if you didn't have to grow up in that scenario. But I want people to know, you know what? You actually can change your life and you can provide for your family and you can be financially free and you can be, mentally and physically free and you can have good relationships. And the thing that I seem to get from a lot of people, especially a lot of Christians, is you're all about money or you're all about this or you're all about that. I'm like, no, I am all about production. I am all about like taking responsibility for life and going and saying, I'm not going to complain about something and not understand that I have the ability to change it. Does that make sense? And I feel like when people are like, you lose touch with reality, I'm like, yes, because the reality for the average person is they are a lazy piece of shit that is not taking responsibility. You know what I mean?
I mean, I do acknowledge too, part of success is luck. Like, we're very lucky. I was lucky. Okay, both my parents were born in Dominican Republic.
Mm-hmm.
If I was born in Dominican Republic, my life would have been fucked.
Yeah.
And so I was born in the United States.
Yep. Luck.
I had a good mother. Like I was never like in an unsafe situation growing up.
Yeah.
At home. I feel like that's extremely lucky, especially for the area that I grew up in. I went to, my high school was pretty shitty, but we had some decent teachers that at least showed me like I remember the first time we had an entrepreneur come into the school to speak to us. Is this guy, he wrote a book called $2 to Happiness. And it's about how he basically had $2 when he was starting out and he built this whole business. And I remember talking to him and he told me he was a millionaire and he never went to college. And I feel like that was very lucky for me to hear at 15, 16, because it just opened my mind.
Yeah.
So I think that there's definitely like, luck is, I don't think it's a massive role, but most people listening to this share the same luck. That
if you're born in America, I feel like you've been dealt a pretty good hand.
For sure.
Generally speaking, obviously exceptions, but generally speaking.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. So, but okay. So think about the odds of being born in America. 8 billion people on the planet.
I know.
300 million people in America. I don't know what percentage. Somebody good with fractions. What percentage is that?
I don't know. It doesn't matter because I'm not talking to people that are not here. Like, because this is the culture. Dude, I traveled. I went around the world. My wife got sick with a test-leading parasite. We came back here, and I was like, I'm never leaving America again. People are like, I want to see culture. I'm like, go.
Bro, that's why I don't give a fuck about traveling. And everybody's like, how don't you like? Bro, I hate traveling. I already live in the best country. Why? Everything from here is a downgrade.
Yeah, Alex Becker's like, not Shanghai. What's the friggin' Singapore, right? Or Dubai, or like whatever. I'm like, Dan Henry's moving to Dubai. I'm like, dude, America, man. Like, I'm born and raised in, like, I am an American.
Can you tell? I have a residency in Mexico, and that's just a backup plan. And I just liked during COVID how Mexico handled COVID compared to the US. I went to Mexico like 2 or 3 times. I was like, you people are pretty logical down here, and it was really easy to get the residency, so I just got it as a backup. It's actually, if anyone wants to do it, very easy. You just have to do, it's called financial solvency, economic solvency. They just check your bank statements and you have to make like $3,000 gross a month.
Oh my God.
And they're like, all right, you're in, come on. So I got my Mexican residency. But I think about like, shit, the fan here, and I had to move to Mexico. That'd be like my next logical place because it's right there and I have the residency. I'm like, dude, I'd be really fucking sad. Like, I'd be really fucking sad.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap it. This is good. This is fun, bro. Thank you for coming on. I do have a couple quick questions though before we wrap it up. Who do you think is going to win the election? Okay,
I haven't kept up with politics lately. I'm assuming it's going to be Trump Biden.
It's Trump. Oh yeah, that is the nominees.
What's weird about this election is like, bro, I haven't felt like people have been campaigning. Like,
Because, dude, Trump literally, as we speak, is under a gag order and in court almost every day. He couldn't go to his son's graduation because they kept him in court. He couldn't be with his wife on his anniversary because they kept him in court.
Sense.
Like, he can't talk about things. They're threatening him with jail time if he talks. Like, they're just trying to
But even
lawsuit.
When have you heard of
Bro,
a Biden rally?
It's Biden's a dead body, right? Like, he literally, like, he doesn't need to. They kept him in his basement last time, right?
No, I just like who.
But the dark horse is Robert Kennedy, right? So RFK Jr., right?
I've heard him talk a couple times.
He's running as an independent. So he left the Democratic ticket. He's running as an independent. There's 0% chance he wins because he's polling at 10% or like whatever, right? But he'll swing the election, right? One way or the other, he'll pull votes. So I'm just curious. Who do you think?
My best guess would be like, bro, everybody I know who like voted for Trump and then voted for Biden regrets it.
Yeah.
So I think all those people are going to go back to Trump. I think all the OG Trumpers, like I've never met anyone who's like, I used to love Trump until. Yeah. So I don't think any of those are going to swing. So I think it swings back into Trump's direction. It's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I just don't like, nobody likes Biden. I have not met a single person that's like, Biden's the best president. He's great. Like, I love him. He's 4 more years.
Yeah.
No one, not a single person ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And I've asked people. So I don't see how lowest approval rating in history. Yeah. I don't see how he wins.
I'll tell you how he wins.
Election fraud.
Well, yes, election fraud, but they, import 10 million people illegally into the country with an open border and make it very easy for them to vote. And then, I mean, you saw what they did in 2020. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but like, yeah. So anyway, I think Biden wins. I just don't see him letting Trump back in. I think Trump wins actually. I think he gets more votes and actually wins, but I don't think they let him in.
We'll see.
We'll see. It'll be fun. It'll be good years. Election years are always fun. What's your biggest regret in life?
My biggest regret in life, dude, that's a hard one because I have no like massively glaring mistake that I've made. There's small things, like there's certain things I would do differently in business had I started out. Like I feel like I wasted a lot of time going down the wrong paths in business. I don't know. I haven't had anybody like in my family die where I'm like, I should have spent more time with them or anything like that. Yeah. So it sounds kind of morbid, but my biggest regret probably hasn't happened yet.
Oh, jeez. That's fair. That's fair. All right. We're pretty good friends. We've been friends for a while. You're one of my best friends. What's one piece of advice you have for me on any realm?
I already told you, like I would see you like once every 6 months, and then you're like, I'm gonna do this, and then next time I see you, you're like, I'm gonna do this. I'm like, bro, just any one of those things stuck to for 3 years is better than like just jumping from thing to thing. Yeah.
We found it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Last question. You're at the end of your life. You're on your deathbed. And everybody you've touched, everyone you've been called to serve and had an impact on their life, they forget everything that you ever said or done. But you get to leave them with one final message, piece of advice, something that no justification needed. They will believe it at face value and live out it. What is it?
As I've gotten older, I've gotten more cautious with giving people advice because my advice is always what I would do.
Yeah.
And what I would do is based on what's worked for me.
Yeah.
And I've seen people give completely opposite advice that has worked for them.
Yep.
But for me, it's just bad advice. So I'd be cautious to give all of humanity one piece of advice.
Well, just everyone you've impacted. Okay, fine. Don't give them advice. Leave them with a statement.
I would say, don't be so sure that you're right. And the reason I'd say that is because I try to keep an open mind to things that I've been wrong about. And there's so many things where I'm like, I fully, wholeheartedly believed that this was 1,000% right. And then I find out that it's wrong. And then I hear people sometimes say things that are wrong with such conviction that I know, like not even like emotionally, I know, like logically with all the facts, I could Google everything.
Yeah.
And I could prove you wrong right now.
Yeah.
Most of the time I just keep my mouth shut because I don't care. Like, I don't care to like make you think that you're wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that I see just at dinner tables and cocktail parties that with 100% conviction say something that I know 100% to be completely wrong is crazy.
Yeah.
So be open to being wrong.
All right. J.R. Rivas, everybody. Bro, thanks for going on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.